has your morning been? How's your week been?
It's good. I'm like renovating my apartment right now, so I'm happy to have found a corner where you can't tell. Because
Yeah.
if I turn this camera, you would see some crazy stuff.
And it's like, thank you, wall, for just being a wall that I
Yeah,
can stand on.
yeah. It's over here. Is not pretty. But over here it's great. So it's all good.
Oh, congrats on renovating. Still a fun thing to be doing.
I'm just like going in between like these like crazy, like fancy Tony events and then like this reality in my house that it's like,
Yeah,
it's like could not be more. Yeah.
yeah, red carpet to then be like, how do I fix my carpet in my apartment?
I can't see the carpet. It's gone.
She's gone.
Yeah.
So getting right into it, how does it feel to be the second female choreographer to be double nominated for a Tony Award, and after all of your Broadway debuts to happen all at once? How are you feeling about that?
I mean, obviously it's like my dream come true. I mean, it's like when I was like a little kid, I used to watch the Tony Awards and like, I would record the numbers and I would teach myself the choreography. Like that was my access to Broadway and to like amazing choreography. And I don't think I even knew the word choreography, but like I just loved dance, as a kid and watching that. And so to be a part of that community, it just feels absolutely incredible. And getting to go to all these events that are all around the Tonys and it's this season, you really just feel like Broadway's such a community, and it's so supportive and amazing to be a part of it because there's just so many fabulous people involved.
Yeah. So with these shows that you've been working on, both K-pop and Juliet, I was wondering, what was it like to be involved with both of the shows around the same time as they both kind of premiered in New York?
I mean, it was quite an interesting fall, and these shows like, it takes so long to develop a new musical. So K-pop was something I was actually working on for like 8 years before it came to Broadway, and Juliet about 5 years. So it was just this wild moment where suddenly these two projects that I had been with for so long were like both opening on Broadway. And they were in tech at the same time. And for anyone who doesn't know, tech is like a crazy process where you're in the theater like all day and you're working out all the light cues and you're there's so many elements because like theater is not just what you create in the rehearsal room. Is like so many different voices, and some of those voices you don't get to incorporate in your show until you're in tech. So the lighting design, the set pieces, the costumes, like all those things start to come together. And it's just these really long days where you have to really entertain yourself, and you have amazing people around you and you just have a really good time. But I was doing that in two different theaters and just like running through Times Square and trying to like be at the right place at the right time. And it was so like, I don't even think I realized it was happening because it was so crazy. And then all of a sudden there was this one day where I was in Times Square and the shows were both open. And I was like, wow, I have two shows that are on Broadway. Like I could go uptown or downtown and like see my choreography on Broadway in two different, it was just such a crazy moment. Like it really hit me, after it all happened.
Yeah, that's thrilling. Also, in regards to both of those shows, they're both very theatrical and they both had a lot of lighting and staging and so many set things involved with it. I was wondering, with that process, working on these shows for so long and then getting into tech, how was that intertwining the ideas of theatrics with the choreography that you created?
I mean, it's so important that everybody is like on the same page, and that really comes from like the vision of the director to like you know have people, because when you think about it, like lighting design, for example, they're working on their own in like something we call previs, so they're like doing it almost like on a computer before they're able to like actually have everybody and all the equipment live. And so it's really important that the director has like a really clear vision, so that by the time you all come together, it's like we're all like funneling to this point of like the vision of the show, you know. And so much of that is just collaboration, like having really great dialogue and being able to say, okay, well, you know, what I'm kind of picturing is this, and then what the designer's picturing is that, and what the director's picturing is like, as long as we're all talking and like on the same page, then when you get into this space, it like pretty much should work, you know.
Mhm.
It's you know, it's much more of a challenge when like, you know, you thought it was going to be this and the designer thought it was going to be that, and actually it's neither, and you're both like, like, how do we fix this? So it's just you know, it just like depends on you know, how, what it is you're trying to communicate in that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's so clear that there was so much dialogue and conversations happening throughout the processes, especially seeing it on stage and seeing how all the elements are really married to one another and accentuate one
Absolutely.
another. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, right, like the choreography looks so good because, you know, first of all, the way the cast performs it, right? Because no matter what I make as steps, if they don't like bring their heart and soul to it, it will feel empty, right? But it's also, it's the costumes they're wearing, it's the lighting around them, it's the set, it's the emotion of the book and how that has like led us to this musical moment. It's the overall vision of the director. It's, you know, it's all these things that like come together to create the moment that is the scene.
Yeah, the moment. That's so stunning to watch. Regarding K-pop and everything that you mentioned, it was an 8-year long process. What was it like working on that? And what did you do to prepare yourself to work on such a specific show with a very specific genre of dance? You have such an extensive dance background and an extensive concert choreography and creative process. So I was just wondering, how did that aid in the creation of K-pop choreography versus things that you maybe needed to research more, things you needed to collaborate on? What was that like?
I mean, absolutely. Like when we started working on K-pop, you know, you have to kind of like take yourself to like, you know, almost a decade ago before the world. I mean, like K-pop was huge in Asia, but it wasn't necessarily huge here at the time. So this is like, you know, before America and myself knew about BTS or Blackpink, you know, I mean, these, you know, these groups that have like really like, you know, taken over America and become so popular, it's kind of hard to imagine like the time before them. But when I first like heard about K-pop and I started, you know, checking out videos online, I just fell in love with it. And I was like, this is incredible. And I think like it's like we always kind of talk about like the rabbit hole of K-pop on YouTube. Like you can just like, you can go real deep, you know. And so like the more I worked on the show, like the more research I was doing. And then when it came time for like the sort of like big moment of being able to do the show on Broadway, I was able to work with an amazing associate choreographer named MJ Choi, who's from Seoul, and she like runs a basically like a K-pop dance school called I Love Dance that has, she started, it's so crazy. She like came to America. She started this business where at first she was just teaching like one person in a studio, and now she has 3 locations of the school. And that's like, first of all, it's like amazing American dream, but also just shows you like the growth of K-pop as an industry, that there are enough students for her to fill 3 locations of this school. So, you know, she had never really done theater before, but together, like our different like sort of skill sets really just came together, and our collaboration was just probably the thing I'm most proud of on that show. Was just our collaboration and our friendship, and just being able to learn so much from each other, you know, how we can, because ultimately with K-pop, we were not making a K-pop concert, we were making a piece of theater. So we had to find the language to bridge the gap between these 2 worlds, between the world of theater and the world of K-pop, so that we weren't doing just one, but we were really doing both. And I think in the choreography of the show and in our collaboration, we just smashed that.
Yeah, it's so evident that it was such a great theatrical representation of K-pop dance culture and music. It was so great to watch.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering, with that show, it had a completely different life in Ars Nova. And so I was wondering, what were the transition phases and what were the steps that were needed to be taken to transfer it to Broadway? Because it was like a very different venue, a very different container of show, and then shifting it to a very theatrical, conventional container. What was that like? And what were the things that maybe surprised you? Maybe the things that excited you about the transition?
Sure. I mean, it was definitely challenging because we had this like amazing immersive experience, and we really wanted to hold on to as much of that feeling as we could. But obviously there isn't an immersive, I mean, Circle and Square was like the closest thing to an immersive Broadway theater we could have. But it required so much sort of reimagination of what the show was, primarily by our book writer Jason Kim, to really figure out how to create something new. But also, like, at Ars Nova, the sort of like defining question of the show was, could K-pop cross over? And because that show was in 2017, like, that question got answered and the answer was yes. So we had to also reimagine not just like the container and like the way we did storytelling, but the actual story, because like we couldn't ask the same questions we were asking 5 years earlier. We had to ask new questions, because how can you ask a question, could K-pop cross over, when like how many Grammys does BTS have? Like the answer is very clear. So it's really like a different moment for K-pop as well. And I think for me personally, like, a lot of the challenges were similar. And because K-pop as like a movement genre, is really something people watch kind of like in a box, like when you watch it in a music video, in a dance tutorial, like, people are used to seeing K-pop very front. And both in Ars Nova, but also on Broadway, I was choreographing for things to be watched on at least 3 sides. And so for me, that was like the biggest challenge, was just like, how do you create choreography that's very genre specific to be watched just from like a front angle, to make it work for 3/4 round, so that everyone feels brought into the movement and not like they're not able to connect because everything is like front and they're on the side, so that was like a big kind of like math problem to solve.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And especially with the meshing of the genres and seeing it be executed and having it still be inviting and accessible while also still honoring the genre and the way that it's.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so awesome. And then shifting over to And Juliet, how is that like? Because that was a completely different type of transition, a transition in itself, but it was from the West End to then Broadway. So what was that like for you to then create this show in a completely different area and then come with it to this transfer?
I mean, there's just something magical about And Juliet. Like from the very beginning, it was just something that like you could just feel it in the room. Like this was going to be something so exciting. And I think that's really the combination of the material and the people and the joy. That show is literally infused with so much love from Max Martin, who is the most incredible human to work with, and just so generous and so lovely and so collaborative. And Max was in like every audition and every rehearsal and every tech. Like he is like such a big part of this project, and it's his music, and he's so open to like different perspectives and like how other people hear his music and how, all these things. And so I think like if we're like a triangle and Max is the point, like, it all kind of comes from like that level of love. And then Luke Shepard, our amazing director, David West Reed, our amazing book writer. I mean, there's so many brilliant artists on this show. And it's just always been filled with so much love. And so going from the West End to then we did it in Toronto before we did it on Broadway, but we took like the New York cast to Canada. And I just felt so excited because I knew how special that group of like creatives, like how special the group is, and how when we brought together the American cast, it all just clicked immediately. And I just knew that everyone in that room, including myself, was so lucky to be in that room. And so that's really how I felt about that project. And you know, we did make a lot of adjustments of the show between the West End and Toronto, between Toronto and Broadway, to just really kind of tighten it up and you know, make it the strongest it could be. And that process was just, it just felt really clear, you know, like really clear, like what kind of things we wanted to do. And then it's been just amazing to watch the audiences just lose their mind to it, you know, every time we perform it.
Yeah, it is a show that is just filled with so much love, and it's so evident from the start, like you said, and being able to watch it and feeling this sense of togetherness with the ensemble and the more leading players and how they all are really supporting each other. And I noticed a lot in your choreography that there is this sense of like meshing back and forth, and the ensemble being used to create like the energy, the ambiance, and also storytelling, and then creating like these tableaus from moment to moment. It was just so seamless, and it was so great, especially marrying that with the music. I bet you get this a lot, but being able to choreograph to such popular music, how was that? Was it thrilling, or was it kind of like, what do I do about this song that everybody knows, you know?
I mean, you know, I could see how like it might feel intimidating, but to be honest, like that music just makes you want to dance. So like it's not hard to choreograph Mac Martin. Like it's just not, you know. It's hard to do it to you know, it's always hard to make theater because like you know, you can't just be like, okay, whatever cool step I want to put, you know. That's not the point at all. So it's like really focusing on like, what is the moment, what is the storytelling, what is the character, you know, how are we using movement in this section? Are we using it to sort of express something that's not in the text, or are we using it to tell its own sort of narrative in this particular moment? Or are we echoing the emotion of one of the leads and exploding that out? Are we trying to pull you in? Like, you know, there's so many ways that choreography gets used in any show. But like when you have like that bass line is like those amazing like melodies and rhythms, you know, it just gives you so many. You're always full of ideas. So it's more just like picking the right ones as opposed to like, what am I going to do to this song? No, that does not happen with Max Martin's music. Like, no way.
It just like invites you to move along with it.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like those are the songs that like non-dancers love to dance to, right? Like those are the songs you play at like a wedding and everyone like gets up on the floor. So of course they're like, you know, for dancers, those songs just inspire you, you know, so they're so beautiful and so infectious in the best way.
Yeah. So you've been involved in so many different mediums of dance, from concert dance to filmed dance to stage, Broadway, immersive things, new works. What is it that you find that excites you about working on different mediums, or what are the sort of things that you have to maybe focus on as you bounce from container to container, and what excites you about that? Or what do you notice kind of mesh well together in each artistic process?
You know, every artistic process is so different, and I love working in different worlds, especially worlds I'm not like familiar with, because I think the coolest thing about being an artist is learning from the people around you. And so being able to work in like different containers, you know, I just learned so much. Like there's so many things that I learned working in TV and film that actually are so helpful working in theater, because some, you know, a lot of times we have to like translate our work of the show to television for things like America's Got Talent or The Tonight Show, you know, Good Morning America, like all these kind of things. And I'm so glad that I've had the experiences like working in TV and film, so I can figure out how to take you can't just like film your number from stage. Like it's a completely different medium. So you have to translate. And so that's what I love, is the translation, going from medium to medium and learning so much, and then taking the things I've learned in one medium and putting it to use in another. Because that way I'm always learning. So then I'm always inspired, and there's so many brilliant people. I mean, I just like last week I was in Tulsa making a ballet, and working with ballet dancers is incredible. It's so different, but it's also the same. And that's also makes you just feel like, dance is this universal language that everyone understands all over the world. And there's something about that that's so special, because you can bring in so many different audiences to this language and just learn from all these people that, your path might never cross with. And actually you feel you have so much in common with. And then, the world just feels small and beautiful.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's such a great thing for creatives to be thinking about and to be applying into their lives and their careers, to be always curious, to always be learning and supporting people that are doing different things, and kind of dipping your toes to then always be growing in your own artistic voice. Yeah.
Exactly. I think curiosity is like probably like the most important aspect of being an artist, because I think curiosity keeps you open, and it keeps you alert. And I think if you sort of close that off, then you're just existing in your own box, and like art doesn't exist that way. Like, maybe certain types of art you can do as a soloist, but theater and dance, those are very collaborative genres. So like that curiosity is really like, I think it's the most important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your choreography has such a strong hip hop influence in a lot of what you do. What do you think hip hop has to offer that is so conducive to storytelling, as opposed to maybe other genres?
That is such a good question. I mean, the thing when I think about like the sort of roots of hip hop, and sort of like it's like, the whole like history of hip hop is like so interesting, about people creating this movement genre because they felt their voice wasn't heard. And everything that was happening specifically in New York, when like the b-boy movement started. And I think so much of that movement was about storytelling. Like I think that the root, like really the roots of hip hop are about telling your own story and creating your own character. I mean, you think about like the fact that like, from like the beginning of hip hop, people were like creating these sort of like their sort of like alter ego, their b-boy name, that's a character, right? Like that, like they were creating characters and they were becoming those characters, and then they were using those characters to express themselves. So like it's it's from the community, it's from character, it's from creating movement that's not about just copying the person next to you, but about creating your own movement that only you can do. And like so many of those things they just filter perfectly into theater, about creating movement, creating character. And when I work with actors, it's so similar, because it's like we have to figure out how the character feels in this moment, not how the actor feels, right? Like, but then it has to merge, because the actor has to feel that way. So the movement has to make the actor feel the way that they need to feel in that moment to tell that story. And there's something about that, that really just connects to me to like the roots of hip hop and the character and even like, battle culture. Not that my actors are necessarily in like a battle moment, but there is that feeling of empowerment that's like rooted in hip hop, that can really kind of like come through.
Yeah. And I definitely notice in so much of your choreography how it does feel so rooted in each person's body, and how it is the work that is being translated into their body and how they can perform it to the best of their ability. And that is still so unifying on stage. There's kind of sometimes a narrative I notice where it's like everybody has to look like this and do this, but with your choreography, it feels like, yeah, everyone's doing this, but look at how each person is doing it to the best of their ability. And it's so adding depth and beauty to each story. It's very exciting to watch. And in this final question, you had an interview with the New York Times where you were talking about how important it is to work from an authentic place and to bring your authenticity into the work that you do and into the room. What is your recipe for committing to your authenticity and encouraging the people you work with to work from that as well, and infusing that into the work and in the rooms that you enter in?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things, right? Like, I think for me, the thing that's most important is to create like a positive environment, where everyone feels they can fail, and they can take risk. Because I would never want to create a room where it's like everyone has to do this and this way, and like, I don't think anyone would bring their best self to that room. And I want to create a room where you can be your best self, because your best self is your most authentic self. And I absolutely think that it's so important for everyone to be able to bring that to the work. And I definitely like feel that there's like certain types of movement where you can like put your own spin on it, but everyone still shares like one heartbeat, one rhythm, one vibe. And those moments, you can see the individuality of the people. And I think that's a totally like, it's imperative to authenticity to be able to bring yourself to it, because that is what we are as artists. We are ourselves, right? And that's what we bring to the stage. That's what we bring to the work. That's what I bring every day is your honest self. And if you're kind of like having to cover your honest self to do the choreography, then it doesn't work. It's like actually what I want to do is empower everyone to bring themselves to it. And then like what we share as artists, even no matter how different we are, like that will come out if the environment and the energy is right.
Yes. And what a gift it is to be able to be a part of a space that facilitates that and to offer that. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing all this. I totally can just see how it's such a gift to work with you and to create with you and to be a part of all the things. And I'm so excited for all your future projects that are still in the works right now and the things that you're going to continue to work on. And congratulations on your double nomination.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
And I
you
hope
so
you have a
much.
lovely rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.